Hello, happy Monday. Hello, everyone. It is Monday, 7 p.m. Eastern Time, and it is time for Convos with Carrie. Tonight we're talking about the gifts of grief, if there are such things. So, a couple housekeeping things before we get started. You will see a comment in the comments below that just mentions our topic, invites you to share the post with your friends. We can get more people in the conversation, especially one about grief, because you never want to feel like you're alone when you're grieving. So if you can share this, I'd really appreciate it. You can tweet it out with the hashtag Convos with Carrie, and it's facebook.com/Carrie Coach. We'll get anyone in your Twitter feed here. So, hey Jack, welcome. So tonight we're going to be talking about the gifts of grief, if there are such things. So I'm going to give it a couple minutes to get some people here, but I see we've got a nice crew already starting. So grief, fun, exciting, good topic, right? So you'll see that comment in the comments below that invites you to share it. So please go ahead and share it so we can get some more people on. Hey, Sarah, welcome. Get some more people involved in this conversation. It's always nice to not feel alone, especially when it comes to grieving. So I will admit, well, first of all, for those of you who don't know me, I'm Carrie Richardson. I'm a lifestyle designer and a coach. And you can find more information about me at carrierichardson.com. I've been a life coach and a business coach, I think for almost 15 years now, which is crazy. I've worked with hundreds of private clients, thousands through my newsletter and courses, helping people basically just get from where they are to where they want to be and get them out of their own way. So it's a nice opportunity to have a supportive partner in your corner and have someone kind of walk in your journey with you, fresh eyes to see what's going on in your situation that you often can't see because you're just too close to it. So always nice to work with someone who can see things differently, who can help you create an action plan and hold you accountable to that action plan, which is the most important part of it, I think. I do have a couple openings in my private coaching practice. So again, you can go to carrierichardson.com/services. You can read about my coaching program and set up a complimentary exploratory chat if you want to chat about working together. So, oh hey, glad you got here on time tonight, Escale. All right, so grief. Here we go. So, I will admit that I'm pretty new to the grief game. Fortunately, I guess. While I have lost people in my life, none as close and as difficult as when I recently lost my father. So my father passed away, over about 9 weeks ago now. And it feels like yesterday, and it feels like an eternity ago, and it also feels like he's actually still living. That's some of the crazy stuff with grief, right? Like it's kind of crazy how it takes you all over the place. So, before I lost my dad, I would, see people either on social media or I would talk to friends and people who had lost someone very close to them. And they would explain to me what they were feeling, or, you'd hear people say things like, really make sure you appreciate each and every day because you just never know. And I always heard that and I got it, but I never really got it. I feel like you don't really get it until you experience it firsthand, because it's almost unexplainable, the roller coaster that you go on. And so I wanted to talk tonight a little bit about some of the gifts I have found in grief, and it's hard to dig in and find them, but they're there. And again, whether that's you're grieving the loss of a loved one, the loss of a job, the loss of a pet, an important friendship. There's all different kinds of grief, right? I mean, from my experience, grief of losing a loved one is much more difficult than the loss of a job. But we all deal with grief in different ways. And in different capacities. So what I had found when I lost my dad was, I'm someone, as I think a lot of you can probably relate, who doesn't really love to feel crappy feelings, right? Like, who likes to feel the shitty stuff? So, we can make ourselves really busy, or we can focus on other people's stuff, or we can eat or drink or over exercise. Like, there's all sorts of tools that we use to numb difficult emotions. What I found with this kind of grief is any of that ability to compartmentalize in your mind, those walls get totally demoed. They just get knocked down completely. And so all of the feelings that you would typically compartmentalize now rush together and they dump all in the same pool. And it's a weird feeling. It's a weird experience, I should say. So what I found, and I had talked to my family members as well, and they were experiencing the same thing, was you couldn't really hold on to a thought. Very foggy in the brain. Thoughts would come and go. You couldn't really remember anything. But then you'd try to intellectualize the very emotional situation that you're in. And there was just all of this craziness that goes on with all these different emotions just being dumped into the same pool. There's no okay, sadness, I'm going to stick you over there. Okay, anger, I'm going to stick you over there. Okay, confusion, vulnerability. There's no compartmentalizing. It all just dumps into the same place. So, hey, Celine. Oh, Cindy, I saw your note too. Try that good old refresh. It usually works for you. So let's see if that will work. So you get that foggy brain, can't hold a thought. Tears will just come unexpectedly. Like, I won't even feel like I'm about to cry. And then all of a sudden my cheek will be wet. Sometimes there's guilt over not enough tears. And then I can just sometimes forget that he's gone and just think that my dad is at home with my mom, or maybe in the hospital for a stay. It's easy to forget, and that's when I'm reminded that it's like, whoa, holy crap! It's like you re-grieve all over again. The first gift that I noticed in my grief was that pool of emotions, the compartments in my brain that bursted open, and everything kind of came into the same pool. I literally didn't have the ability to numb out, which is what I do. And I was like, holy crap, nothing worked. Nothing worked. It was just the feelings were too strong to numb out. The gift that came with that was, it's like I saw life in 3D. Well, I guess but it was super, super HD. When I would look around, it's like literally things appeared sharper to me, like the outline of the leaves on the tree were very defined, or the colors in that bird, or my vision was just so crisp. It's hard to describe, but I attribute that to not having access to those numbing tools that I grab and reach for when I'm feeling shit I don't want to feel. So to not be able to numb, it's kind of like, it reminds me of what Brene Brown has said. And if you're not familiar with her work, please go watch her TED Talk on the power of vulnerability. Amazing. But like she says, you can't selectively numb emotions. If you choose to numb the pain, then you also numb the joy. And that's something that I never really thought about until I heard her say that years ago. But I experienced it. Man, did I experience it when the grief hit, that I was like, oh, this is what that means. I'm not able to numb the pain, and therefore I'm not able to numb the joy. And that's where it felt like the world was in super high definition, because I saw what it means to not numb the joy that I didn't realize I was numbing as I was numbing the pain. So one of the main gifts that I have found with grieving my father is that I finally got to experience all of my emotions. because I am a pro at selectively choosing which emotions I feel and which ones I stuff down. I could be, crying hysterically, and I can get myself in check in a matter of 10 seconds. I can stop the tears, I can pull it together. I'm a master at that. It's not something that serves me well. Sometimes it does, certainly. But to not have the ability in that moment allowed me to really finally experience all of those emotions and to disprove that crap I would tell myself of, you don't want to go down that road, Carrie. That is way too uncomfortable of an emotion. You won't be able to handle it, or if you open up the floodgates, they'll never stop. All that shit you tell yourselves when you don't want to feel difficult emotions. I got to witness firsthand that that's not true, that it actually feels, as strange as it sounds, it feels really good to just feel, to not try to hold it together. That's something that I have to remind myself of, but that I would say is the number one gift in grief. So if you're someone like me who picks and chooses what you're going to feel, then you'll know what I mean. And if you've experienced this in your life, whether it be through grief or elsewhere or otherwise, to have the feeling of, oh my God, I let myself go there, or I didn't have a choice. I went there and it was not so bad. It was, yes, it was heartbreaking and sad. And it was just like I was overwhelmed with the emotions. I mean, like I can still think about as I was on my way to the hospital, Melissa and I were driving to the hospital, and I had my St. Anthony's medal in one hand and a little other prayer medal in another hand. And Melissa's driving, and I'm in the car holding my medals going, please, God, please just let him make it until I get there, or just let him make it. And when I got the call on my way there that he had passed, and we pulled into a rest area, it was 1 o'clock in the morning, so it was empty in there, which it wouldn't have mattered anyway, because I had no control. It was just wailing and crying and sobbing and honestly trying to not throw up. And it was the rawest I have ever felt my emotions in my life. And when I think back to that moment, it's not necessarily a pleasant memory by any means. But what it does is it reminds me of, even when things are so incredibly difficult, it's good to feel the emotions and to let them pour out, and that I will come out on the other side. Hey, Joan. So anyone, I would love to hear, anyone who has experienced this with grief, or just what, I would love to hear some comments or read some comments about what has been your experience with grief. What, were you able to see any gifts in it? Mine is that super high def world that I got to see and feel, and I got to feel emotions that I never had before, or allowed myself to. And while I would undo all of that to just have my dad back, boy, is he around us, which I'll tell a couple examples of that, which I've shared before in some blog posts. But I would undo that whole experience just to have him back. But where I know that's not possible, part of my grieving my loss of him is to try to find some gifts in the grieving. So I feel like that's doing him an honor and almost respecting him in his life. So yeah, so really thinking about what are the gifts in grief. It's sometimes we need something to bring us to our knees so we can know what it's like to pick ourselves back up, and to have that kind of confirmation that we have the strength to let ourselves cry, and we have the strength to pick ourselves back up. Another gift that comes from this, I mean, a few other examples I have here, but again, would love to hear some of yours in the comments below. And don't forget to share this video, please. Would love to have some more people join the conversation. Another gift that I got in this was really highlighting that strength comes in vulnerability. that, we often hear people say, like, I need to be strong. And we often think that that means to not cry or to not be upset or to not lose it in front of the people we love. And what I've found is that the most courageous thing you can do, the strongest thing you can do, is to let yourself be vulnerable around the people that you love and give them the opportunity to show up for you and to rise up. I'm not great at that at all. And, right after my dad passed, right after, like the next day, I jumped on a video chat with a couple high school friends and was just really raw and vulnerable with them. And back in those days, that was not me. I was pretty buttoned up, kept my feelings close to the chest. But I just really, I didn't have the capacity to hold it together. And, it was a big, vulnerable moment for me to even ask them, hey, can we get on a video call so, I can share with you what happened and what's going on. And I just sobbed with them and they sobbed with me. And, when I think about that experience, like I could cry right now, it was just so beautiful that they held that space for me and let me feel whatever was going on. And they just let me blab and they listened to me and they didn't try to fix it or make it better or say any of those things that people say, oh, he's in a better place and, he's finally at peace or all that stuff, which I know people mean their best when they say that, but they really just held that space for me. And then after that, they rose to the occasion because I'm not good at asking for help, and they were just bombarding me in the most loving, nicest way with support. I didn't even have to think about it. It was just like, we got this, we're going to take care of that. It was amazing. So to my friends, Lisa, Kristen, all of you, just thank you so much for your support. That is another gift of grief is, it deepens relationships for you if you let it. Before my dad passed, he had several hospital visits, different procedures done, or, different reasons to go into the hospital. And because I come from such a large family, I'm one of 7, the most efficient way for us to all stay in contact and give updates on his care was through a group text message. And so those would happen quite often with updates, whoever was in there visiting him, what, the conversations they had with the doctor, etc. And so my family's close anyway. I'm very fortunate that we're a very tight family. But we had never been in such frequent communication, right? And so even after he passed, those group texts still happen. And it's just awesome. It's such a, my family, my siblings live all very close to each other, most of them. I'm about an hour and a half away from everyone, and I have another sister who's about an hour away. So it's very difficult down here. It can often feel like I'm grieving alone, knowing that they're all near each other up there. And even that one night I was able to send a text out to my siblings and just say, God, it feels really lonely to grieve down here. When Dad was in the hospital, those group text messages that went around were my lifeline. And, I guess I'm just saying I miss you all. And they just all, boom, messages of love pouring back. And I felt so close to them. So that's the other gift in grief, is that it can deepen relationships for you in ways that you could have never imagined. I now feel much more comfortable being vulnerable with my friends who I didn't have a choice otherwise when I spoke with them. So it's really fascinating. I'm just going to pause for 1 second. Sarah, I saw so many different expressions of grief at my grandmother's funeral last week. Sarah, I'm so sorry for your loss. I know, and I know you know. It's not easy, and, I would love it if you'd be willing to share some of the examples of the expressions that you saw. It would be really lovely to just hear what kind of expressions of grief you saw at your grandmother's funeral. And again, I'm really sorry for your loss. So that's another big gift that comes from grief, is the deepening of relationships. At my father's wake and funeral, it was this interesting dynamic to be in because, I have my mother who lost her husband of 58 years. And so I have her grief, I have my grief, I have my nieces and nephews' grief, my siblings' grief, and we all just found this way to just all be there for each other. I'll say it again, I'm very blessed for the family that I have, because we just really know how to be there for one another and respect where each of us is in our grieving process. So even though I come from a very close and strong family, I feel even closer to them than I did before, and I didn't think that was possible. I feel a different kind of closeness with my dad, which is interesting. Hi, Linz. I felt close to him anyway, but to think back to the memories with him gives me a different kind of relationship with him, which is difficult to explain. But it's really intangible, but it's this beautiful, almost other level type of relationship with him. I mean, I know he's around. He has made himself abundantly clear. All of my siblings and my mom and some of my nieces and nephews have seen very clear signs from him that there's no mistaking that that he's around. It's just so beautiful. So, it's like it's refreshing and it's comforting, but then it's also like it just makes me want you here more. Joan, grief is the price we pay for great love. It cuts through our ego and self-involvement and reminds us of what's truly important. And as we move, can I not see the rest of that one? Can you read the rest of that one to me, Melissa?
Sure.
If you can see it.
Yeah.
My comments cut off in a certain point, so, okay. And as we move forward in our grief, we realize that we are separated from our loved one by a thin veil. Yeah, I know that my parents are still finding ways to reach out to me. However, everyone handles grief well. For some people and some families, the closeness and relationships kind of implode. Yeah, thanks, Joan. Thanks for sharing that. You're right. That's a really good point, that not everyone's experience is like mine. And I can really see how a death of a loved one can completely break apart a family. I imagine that's probably even more difficult when both parents are gone, because then there's that connection that's not there. But yeah, I can see that some people just can, like you said, it can just make it implode. And so then it's looking at, well, gosh, for that to happen and for that to feel the way it does, like, what is there a gift in that? Like, that's sometimes when you have to dig deep, right? Like, okay, this really sucks. If I were to look for the gift in it, is there anything? And I don't know the answer, honestly, but I feel like with every example of dark, there is light that's always looking to make its way through. So if we can look for that, sometimes it takes some real excavating, then we'll be able to look at it and see it. Let me just see here.
Can you read Sarah's?
I'm reading some of Sarah's.
Here.
Hold on, let me see if I open. Just hold on one second, guys. I want to be able to read everyone's full comments, so I'm going to see if I sign on to my laptop. I just hope there's no, interference or anything. One moment, please. Thank you for your patience. Let me see. Yep, I can see comments here. Great. Okay, so Sarah, I know my dad, his wife, and my brother stayed close to each other. The family, her children and spouses and the grandchildren each shared a couple memories that my aunt included in the eulogy. 2 days after she died, I loaded up YouTube and Angels Among Us showed up on the feed. Oh, see? Beautiful. I know she's with my mom. Yeah, it's amazing. It's just amazing, the signs. I'll tell you the one big one that comes to mind is when my father passed and all of us kids with my mother went to the hospital. Some made it there before he passed. Most of us did not. But when I arrived, I was the last one to arrive because I was a little over 2 hours from the hospital. I went into the family waiting room, and my sister Lisa was there, and a couple of the, I can't remember what other family members, because again, right, grief, foggy brain. But I remember my sister Lisa mentioned something about fireworks, and I said, what do you mean? And she said, oh, just, about a half hour after Dad passed, we looked out the window, and there were these fireworks in the sky. There were just two big firework explosions in the sky. This was like, I don't know, 1:30 in the morning in November. you know. Oh, there's Lisa. Hey, Lisa. Okay, so yeah, my sister Cheryl, her husband Michael, and my sister Lisa. It was in November at like 1:30 in the morning. Absolutely no reason for fireworks to be going off. And there were two big firework explosions in the sky, and my sister Lisa said that they were mostly green, which would make sense. My father was a proud Irishman. So it was like, oh my gosh, you kidding me? Like 30 minutes after he passed, he was like, hey guys, just so you know, what's up? I'm here. So those signs are around. It's amazing. I mean, there's, my siblings and I keep a running list of all the signs we've had since then, and they just keep coming. He is making it abundantly clear that he's still here. So Celine, I want to echo gaining a higher level of closeness with siblings after losing a parent. We lost mom then dad a few years later, and that shared experience really drew us closer, which is exactly what my father kept telling us he wanted us to have through our entire lives. I mean, talk about a gift in the grief, right, Celine? Thank you so much for sharing. Like, as hard as it is to lose your parents, how beautiful that you and your siblings could become closer to each other in that way, because it really can go either way, right? As Joe mentioned, for some people it can break the family apart, and for others it can just make them nice and tight and really close. And I definitely feel a closeness with my siblings in a very different way, and I've always felt close to them, but it's just it's a different, I attribute it to when you show vulnerability in front of people, you have no choice but to deepen the relationship. And we have had no choice but to be vulnerable in front of each other because grief sucks so much, right? It's there's no compartmentalizing in the brain. All the emotions get dumped into the same pool. So, I can think every single one of my siblings, I saw vulnerability and I expressed it in front of them. And it's just nice to know that people can hold a safe space for you when you're feeling that. They're not trying to make you stop crying. They're just giving you a hug or putting their hand on your arm. So I feel a different level of closeness with them, which I'm sure my dad is watching and is thrilled. So, so that's another big gift in the grief is the vulnerability that you can't hide, and the closeness. Again, this is specifically around grief of loss of a loved one. And the other gift I got from the loss of my dad, I had always known my dad to be an incredibly generous, kind man. He was a gruff Irishman, but man, was he a mushball underneath. And he just, at his wake and at his funeral, to see the hundreds of people come through. There was a line out that funeral home door from 30 minutes before the wake started right through to the end. And to meet so many people and to hear specific examples and stories of his generosity, of which I had already known about, but to hear what he did for other people. And, he was that true angel in that he was very generous with people, but he didn't boast about it. He didn't brag about it. He didn't tell about it. It was like people told me stories and I was like, really? Like, I wasn't surprised that he did it. I was just surprised that I didn't know about it. So you get to learn things about your loved one that through the eyes and through the experience of others, that is really beautiful as well. And boy, did we experience that at the wake and the funeral. It was pretty amazing. Lindsay, my niece Lindsay is here. Hey, Linz, Papa is looking down and happy with all the family staying so close together. Yeah, he is. My father always loved to sit back at holidays when there was so many of us, and he would just sit back and look at the crowd, and every now and then he would just be like, your mother and I started all this. You know, he was so proud of the crowd that he had created. Yeah, it was really beautiful. Just got through the 1 year anniversary of my husband's death. He had cancer, and so I had time to prepare in advance. Although I missed him, I also felt freedom. No longer did I have to do things to satisfy his family in the way they thought I should. I also felt anger because he did not leave the house in good order, and I had a lot to do to fix things. I also saw it as an opportunity that for the first time in 35 years, I could now go any place I wanted and do anything I wanted. Yeah. A chance to start over in a new place. I left Maryland and am now in Florida starting over. This is going to be a good thing. I feel much better in my new place than I did in the house we had lived in together. No regrets. S. Gale Gandhi. Thank you. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. That's powerful. Like that is a gift that I think is can be difficult to share, right? Because there's, like I talked about earlier, all the different feelings of grief. There can be the guilt over not enough tears sometimes, and then all of a sudden the tears will come out of nowhere. But the relief you felt of like, I'm now free to start over. It doesn't mean that you don't miss your husband. It just means that it's like, okay, you know what? Some opportunities and some gifts came with this grief. And it sounds like you're really embracing that, which is great to hear. Yeah, I was just checking for the other comments. Yeah, so it's really powerful. It is a difficult, powerful process that I don't know that it ever ends. Like I said earlier, I really do get it now when people would say, cherish each day because you just never know. I always appreciated that sentiment, but I didn't really absorb it because I hadn't had that experience. And to really have honest conversations and connect in ways like I can remember visiting my dad when he'd be at dialysis and like just holding a safe space for him if he was feeling annoyed by having to go or if he was feeling sad or fed up or if I visited him in the hospital and he was scared. Like, I'm the youngest of his 7 kids, and so it can seem odd, but I would give him the space to express his fear and just hold that space for him. And I was able to see him in a vulnerable place that I usually didn't because he was too busy, trying to raise 7 kids and feed the family. And so we had some beautiful moments together before he passed. And I want to show this. So this, let's see. This is, I'm sure you've all heard about those coloring books, right? Everyone's doing the adult coloring books, which I don't know why they call them that because that sounds dirty. But this is a mandala coloring book. And one time I went in to visit my dad at dialysis, and often he would watch TV or read the paper, or he might nap a little bit, but mostly he had someone with him because he really preferred to have the company. And so I went in there once, and I walk up on him, and he's coloring this with little colored pencils. And now you have to imagine he's this big, gruff Irishman, right? Gruff, gravelly voice that intimidated a lot of people. And I walk into dialysis, and he's coloring this. He looks like the sweetest little boy with his colored pencils. And it was the epitome of the juxtaposition of my father. There's this big, gruff guy who is, barking orders at the dialysis nurses while coloring this in between. This showed his soft, gentle heart, despite the gruff exterior. So and to know his hands were on this, what it means to me, what it represents to me, how I think it encompasses everything that he was and is, but to also know his hands were on this and colored it. This is going to be framed and with me for the long haul, for sure. Leah Marie, my niece, I started coloring again. It reminds me of him every time I go to color. Me too. I started too. Missy and I, Melissa and I, were coloring on New Year's Eve. That's we spent our New Year's Eve on the couch coloring mandalas in honor of Dad. And it really does. Like, it makes you feel closer to him, right, Leah Marie? It's like because you know he's up there smiling when he sees you coloring, because he's like, oh, I love that, because he knows your reason for doing it. And yeah, so it's like you're thinking of him, and it's beautiful. So yeah, so that is my dad's coloring, which I just love. So that's a real gift, as I get to look at something like that. And then the other thing I have that I look at often is this ornament that I always have hanging up now. So this, I don't know if you can see, I know it's going to be backwards because it's Facebook, but so it says Love Dad, and so that's his handwriting, which I just love. So there was an artist I found on Etsy who I had a greeting card from my father that he had signed Love Dad, and I was able to scan his signature and send it over to this artist on Etsy, and she laser engraved it onto an ornament. I gave one of these to each of my siblings and my mother as well, and it has the year on the back. So I look at this often. This is always near me as well, and it's bittersweet, right? Because I look at this and I see that it's his handwriting, and it can make me sad because I just miss him so much, and I see that handwriting, and it really just reminds me so much of him. It can be difficult to look at it, but it can also be lovely. So even when the tears come, I don't know where I'm getting them in check, but even when the tears come, I consider that a gift as well, because it means my heart is opening for him to come down and fill it some more. So yeah, so I love to look at that as well. So those are other gifts of grief, is finding things, whether they're physical things or just kind of memories of how you can hold that person so close in your heart, if you want to. Sometimes it may not have that same emotion or that same feeling for you, but it can be beautiful reminders. On the other side of thing, you all know, those of you who know my work, that I'm very anti-clutter. So I talk to clients a lot about, don't hold on to something just because it's from a deceased loved one. That means you're keeping it out of guilt, but as long as you're not keeping it out of guilt, this is not kept out of guilt. This brings me such joy and such pleasure. And if ever the time comes that I'm keeping it out of guilt, I won't keep it, because I know he wouldn't want me to. I don't see that happening, but I did have a music box that my father gave me years ago, and we were out shopping, and he snuck it at the register. I didn't see it. And when we got in the car, he gave it to me. And I thought, and he could see it in his little face, he was so excited to give it to me, and I loved it. And I had it on my desk for years, and then it fell and it broke. And I kept it on my desk anyways, because I'm like, oh my gosh, he was so excited to give that to me. I can't get rid of it. It wasn't fixable. It had broken in a way that it wasn't repairable. And so eventually I got rid of it, and I thought, this is silly. I look at that and it makes me sad that it's broken. So he wouldn't want me to keep that if it's making me sad. He would want me to keep something because it brings me joy. So I was able to get rid of that without guilt. This brings me joy. This is going nowhere. This brings me joy. This is going nowhere. So sometimes it takes some real excavating and some deep digging to come up with the gifts in grief. But they're there if you look for them. It may take some reflection, some pausing. Yeah, so... Oh, I was just going to say, does anyone else have anything they want to say about grief? And then Wendy. My dad is going to be 86 and having some health issues. I realize he won't be here forever, so listening to others who are experiencing grief helps me prepare for the days when he will no longer be here. Yeah, you're welcome, Wendy. Yeah, it's, well, happy birthday to your dad, first of all. And yeah, it's, be very intentional in finding those moments with him. They don't have to be these big, momentous occasions. They can be... I found that it's the quieter, softer, fleeting moments that stay with me the most, because they don't feel so manufactured, Like when I would have those moments with him at dialysis or in the hospital, and I would allow him to be vulnerable in front of me, and he would, which was such a gift to me. I felt honored that he was able to be, that he could get beneath the gruff, right? Because that's a lot of us protect our vulnerability with like gruff and anger and defensiveness. And he was like that as well. But when he would drop below the anger and get to the real vulnerability, I felt so honored and it felt like such a gift. So whether it's around his health, Wendy, or just like look for little moments. One of my sisters would go for rides with him through the old neighborhood, we called it. So the house where they raised their first 5 to 6 kids, and would just ask him about memories from that time. So that's one thing I found, and I would recommend to you, Wendy, is that they love to tell stories, and share their experiences. My father, what did he used to say? Lisa, if you're still on, he used to say something like, you have a history book sitting in your living room, or something like that. But it's true, like to really, he loved when we would ask him questions. One time I emailed him and I asked him to email me a list of all the jobs he ever held. And he got it back to me like within the hour. He was so excited to share that information. So, I would interview him, tell me the story again about how you met mom, and, what was your wedding like, and, what was it like when you served in the Air Force? Tell me some stories about that. And because I think, from my experience in my relationship with my dad, as people age, they can start to feel irrelevant. And so asking them stories can help them to feel like, hey, I still matter, I'm still here. So, yeah, ask your dad stories. And, as my sister Lisa says here, she wished she had recorded some of the stories so she could hear his voice. So record some of the stories. Lisa, I'm pretty sure that Cheryl had recorded mom and dad on her iPhone. So ask her, maybe we can get the videos from her. I have him speaking at his retirement party. It's a crappy video, but I am going to put it on my computer and try to enhance it a bit. And I also have him when he gave the toast at my sister Michelle's 50th birthday dinner. It's a really crappy video, but anyway, I'm going to try to enhance that as well. So fortunately, we do have him on tape, if you will, showing my age. But yeah, so Wendy, take those tips to record some of your conversations, or come up with a list of 10 interview questions and just hit record and let them have at it. It's a gem that you will treasure for sure. So yeah, so that's what I have to say about grief. It's a roller coaster. It really is. And that's the main point I want to share. And I've talked to my mom about this, is I think you suffer more in your grieving when you try to orchestrate and control the process. I have found that it is so much, I'll say, easier to ride the waves of grief when you just go for the ride. It's like, I don't know, if you've ever like sat in one of those tubes and floated down the lazy river. Sometimes there's like a little rapid, sometimes it's all relaxing. Like, just ride the waves, instead of trying to control them or manipulate them. That's where I think we suffer more than we need to. So, I'll talk to my mom about that a lot. It's like, hey, if you feel like you want to cry, cry. If you don't feel like crying for days, don't cry. Don't try to force it because you feel guilty. Don't try to stop it because you feel weak. Like, just let it roll. It's so self-honoring, and I think it's also very respectful of the memory of your loved ones. So I will leave you with that. If anyone wants to share anything else in the comments, I'm happy to stay on for a couple more minutes. Even if it's just sharing your experience with a deceased loved one, sometimes it just feels good to tell a story about someone you love who has passed. Or, anyone watching the replay, please feel free to share in the comments below. I'll circle back around to this video and respond and chat a little bit on there. So yeah. So thanks everyone for listening to me ramble and for sharing your experiences with grief, the gifts or the challenges of it. And so I hope you join me back here next Monday, 7 o'clock, for another Facebook Live, Convos with Carrie. And would love to hear some topics that you'd like covered. I have some other ideas here, like I mentioned last week, maybe about how to get unstuck, how how to set healthy boundaries. There's all sorts of things we can talk about. So what other kind of convos do you want to have? Would love to have another date with you next Monday night and chat some more. So thanks so much, everyone, for spending this time with me. It was really great chatting with you all. Thanks, fam, for joining. Lisa, Lee Marie, Lindsay. Love you all. Thank you so much. Jones, thank you so much. It's just makes me smile to see your names come up on the screen. So thanks, everybody. Hope you have great weeks, and I'll talk to you next Monday. Bye.